literature, and lifelong enjoyment of reading. How often do we see someone reading a book these days? Is it more common to see someone with a phone or an iPad? And what are they doing with this iPad or phone? They're certainly reading. They're reading from a screen. We don't often see people reading books these days. And for me, when I talk about books, I am talking about literature. And in schools today, we have students reading books, of course. They read books largely for information. It's not often that they get to read literature or literary texts, except maybe in the language classroom, the Malay language classroom, or the English language classroom. And even as they read these books, are they reading for information? Are they developing skills? Or is it for literary purposes? Now, what I'd like to do today is talk about how literature can provide enjoyment. Often, when teachers talk about literature, it is related to exams. Very often, students are told that we are going to study a poem or a short story, and this is in relation to the exam. And therefore, this idea of pleasure or enjoyment is often not linked with reading literary texts. What I like to propose in this talk is that we nurture our learners to enjoy literature. And what do we mean, or what do I mean by literature? When I say literature, I'm referring to either reading short stories, novels, poetry, or even drama. Now, in order for our students to be able to read any of these things, we need to nurture them. That is a key word, nurturing our learners to become readers. Now, very often, reading takes place in the classroom and it is teacher-led. Again, what kind of role models do teachers play when it comes to reading literature? Have your students seen you reading a novel or carrying a novel when they visit you in the staff room? Have you told them what is your favorite poem, or who might be your favorite writer? What I think we should do is to bear in mind that our students look to us and they see us. And if we promote reading and we show to them that we enjoy literature and that they too should develop this love for reading and this love for literature, why do we want our students to read literature? I believe we want them to read literature because literary texts are about lives. Whether they read Malaysian writers or international writers, what is important is that they read and that they're reading about life. And we want them to connect with what they are reading. So it's also very important that we aid our students when it comes to reading literature. Today, we have literature which is available to all ages of readers. It is important that we are aware that there is children's literature for our young learners in the primary school. There are young adult literature and literary texts which can be used for our secondary school students. And of course, then there will be literature that is meant for adults. Now, what is important is for us to connect our readers to the right kind of literary materials. Do not expect Malaysian secondary school students to take a liking for Shakespeare. Shakespeare is very much for the mature and adult reader, for the very proficient and competent reader. Most of our learners are beginning as readers, and therefore we should give them books that they can understand, that they can relate to. Children's literature is targeted for children, the way it is written, the format, and the layout. Young adult literature is again targeted at adolescents. Now, it is important that we give them the opportunity to read about characters and issues which they can connect with, which are young adult issues, where they can see themselves in the books that they are reading. If we want them to enjoy literature, it is important that we give them the right kind of reading material. They need not read adult literature at this point. They can come to it at a later stage. Now, for our learners then, teachers should be there to help them find out what is available to them. There are a lot of young adult literary texts available today. Now, we don't have to always look at the international or American or British texts. Even in Malaysia, we have young adult literary texts that are available. For example, Hannah Alkaf's book about the May 13th incident is a very relevant book for our young readers. There are collections of young adult writing by Malaysians who our students might be able to connect with because they are familiar with the context, they are familiar with the issues. So I think it's very important that as teachers, we play an important role in cultivating our students' reading habit. It's important that the element of enjoyment is brought into their reading experience. Very often we talk about elitist literature, highbrow literature. I think it is important that we look at popular culture when we talk about enjoying literature. There are a lot of TV series which are tie-ins with novels and stories that our students are familiar with. Very often if they watch a TV series, they could be motivated to then read the novel or read the short stories. There are popular culture texts, for example, the Harry Potter series and the movie tie-ins. Besides Harry Potter, there are other young adult texts which fall under popular culture. It might be necessary for us to introduce our students to popular culture texts before they go on to read literary fiction. Very often we emphasize on literary fiction, and some of our readers or some of our learners may not be ready for it. And therefore, I think it's important that we are sensitive to our students' needs, and as teachers, we should pay attention to what are some of their concerns, their issues, and we should then try to find titles that they would enjoy reading. Again, there will be issues of language ability, content. As teachers, then, we have to play the part. We have librarians in schools who can also support us in our attempts to make reading enjoyable. And once young people read, we hope that they will then go on to read in their adult life. We hope that it'll be something that they would want to do. There are many things that are open to them, like reading circles, reading groups. They can start among themselves and later go on to find other friends in their adult life. So I believe that the key What is key or really important is nurturing readers to enjoy reading so that reading would become a lifelong experience. Thank you.